Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start. So we have Caitlin Holmes here. She's going to talk about the role of nutrition in injury prevention and rehab. I'm going to give a short introduction, and then I'm going to let her take over. It should only take about 3 minutes. So my name is Shannon O'Grady, and I work for Gnarly Nutrition. I have a lot of titles, but Gnarly Nerd seems to be the one that is most accurate. I get the pleasure of working on products, working with athletes and customers, doing a lot of education. It's a lot of fun and I love it. For those of you that don't know about Gnarly Nutrition or what we do, we're a company that produces natural and NSF certified sports supplements. So everything from pre-workout, branched chain amino acids to protein powder. We've been around for a while. We're a partner of USA Climbing, and we pride ourselves on really producing efficacious and delicious supplements. We've been hosting, this is actually the last clinic in our series, and we've been so excited by the response to it. We've had tons of people sign up for these clinics, and we plan on doing more like this in the future. So I think it's fitting that Caitlin, who's really presenting on a really relevant topic to the whole series, which is longevity in sport, is presenting today. We've received a lot of really great feedback, and at the end of Caitlin's talk, you'll get a prompt that'll ask you some survey questions and ask you for some feedback. And as a speaker and a presenter, it's always really nice to hear what people have to say. So if you have a minute, please go ahead and fill that out. I also want to let you know that during this campaign, we also launched a new product, Gnarly Collagen Pro. There's a lot of really interesting research and more coming out showing that collagen can be helpful for injury rehab. It may reduce the risk of injury in musculoskeletal tissues, and that it can really help with pain and in things like osteoarthritis and even in joint pain for athletes. So you'll also be getting an email with a discount coupon for Collagen Pro if you want to try it. In that email, you'll also, which will come within the next 24 hours, you'll get a link to a recording of this talk. So if for any reason you don't get that email, first check your junk mailbox, because that seems to be something that's happening a lot. And then feel free to email us and we'll happily resend it to you. And then in addition to the survey at the end, which we'd love you to fill out, if you, screenshot something that Caitlin's presenting that you're just blown away by, and we'll tag her and tag us and share it on social, that's always appreciated as well. Okay, so that's everything I have to say. I'm happy to introduce Caitlin Holmes, covering the role of nutrition in injury prevention and rehab. Caitlin is a functional sports nutritionist who specializes in climbing nutrition. She works with climbers to develop effective nutrition plans for long-term health and performance. She believes that nutrition is the missing puzzle piece for athletes that plays a major role in achieving goals, preventing injuries, and supporting the body to continue climbing for years to come. And I agree 100%. So without further ado, oh, and one last thing. If Caitlin asks you a question and wants you guys all to comment on it, if you'll use the chat box for that. But if you have a question for Caitlin, if you'll use the Q&A box, just kind of keeping those two things separate, we'll really make sure we get to everyone's questions at the end. Okay, I'll go in the background. Enjoy. Thanks, Caitlin.
Thank you for that intro, Shannon. I'm honestly so thrilled and honored to be here. And just to toot Gnarly's horn for a second, it's just such a phenomenal company. And I really love contributing to a company that really aligns with both my personal and my professional values. And I have so much confidence in their science-backed products. And, I take my supplement recommendations very seriously. And I can't say enough good things about Gnarly. So thank you for having me and giving me this opportunity to contribute to your mission. So as Shannon mentioned, I am a functional sports nutritionist and a certified nutrition specialist candidate. I primarily work with climbers, but also outdoor enthusiasts as well who want to boost their performance and improve their overall health. And my main goal is to help all athletes both recreational and professional, to achieve their health and to have those performance goals by establishing healthy habits and skills that'll effectively last a lifetime. So today I'm going to talk a bit more about the role of nutrition in injury prevention and rehab. And I think for many athletes, nutrition is just a weak link, unfortunately. So from basic nutritional habits to nutrient timing for performance, there's still a ton of room to grow. And one aspect of nutrition that we often forget is that of injury prevention and rehab. So today I'm going to share with you why we as athletes need nutrition for that end. So a little bit of an overview of what we're going to dig into today. I'm going to give you a brief introduction of why we should care. I think it's important to kind of shed some light on why it's important to care about nutrition in this arena. I'll also give you some context with the basics of Nutrition 101 so that that gives you the context you need for later with the recommendations I'm going to be offering. And then I'll also go into the importance of nutrition for athletes specifically. And then I will offer some nutritional strategies for injury prevention specifically, and then nutrition as a rehab tool. And then I'm also going to dig into the dangers of energy deficits as well before tying it all together. And just a little bit of background on me. I actually didn't start out in nutrition, and kind of like I think Shannon mentioned too, I was a nutrition nerd for a long time, but I ended up going to school for conservation and biology, which is just a fancy term for soil nerd. But I did undergrad research at the time on heavy metal contamination in both plants and soil in Phoenix urban gardens. And I guess you could say that sort of sparked this other interest in me to look at the health and welfare of people who are growing foods in these revitalized spaces. So after working in that career field for a while, I just wanted to work more with the people and actually have a hand in supporting their health. And once upon a time, even before the soil nerd in me came out, I was an aspiring ballerina, but it was actually an injury, or one of those career-ending injuries, that helped me see other things in the world and get more into other activities such as climbing, which is primarily what I do now. But I also have my master's in human nutrition and functional medicine from the University of Western States, and I am in the process of completing clinical hour requirements for the Certified Nutrition Specialist credential. Okay, so before we really dive into today's topic, I want to ask, why should we care about optimizing our nutrition? And if you're watching this, I imagine that you care at least somewhat about injury prevention on some level. And maybe that's because you're rehabbing from an injury you have currently, you've had an injury in the past, or you'd like to simply avoid injury in the future. And the reality is that most of us have probably experienced an injury at some point, but I still think it's important to go over the why we care. And as athletes, again, either recreational or professional, we are continually pushing our limits. And with pushing our limits comes that increased injury risk. So we generally know that we need to train more, or AKA increase our workload, in order to establish or increase those training adaptations. And the classic example that comes to mind here is that balance between both acute and chronic training, and finding that sweet spot in the middle where we perform at that optimum workload. But I think sometimes when we start a new training plan, we get ahead of ourselves and we do too much too soon, or maybe we need to take an extended period of time off from that consistent load. So unfortunately, in both of those instances, our risk of injury goes up. So that star right here indicates that peak performance, and that's determined when the acute and the chronic workload ratio are balanced. And it's here that injury is reduced. But that doesn't mean that we still can't experience injuries. And this is because there are so many things that contribute to injury risk itself. You can train right, you can do all the right things for those adaptations, you can take it slow, but if your stress levels, your sleep, and your nutrition are poor, you will inevitably be more at risk of injury too. So today I'm going to focus on a nutrition perspective because how we fuel is an important factor in how we build and repair muscles, how we produce energy for peak performance, and maintain that mental acuity for performance as well. So before we get going on the role of nutrition in injury prevention and rehab, let's back up a little bit and talk about the basics, because I think it's important to give some framework and context to what we'll be talking about just in a few slides. So when I say basics, I just mean the basic nutrition that all athletes, or really all people, need, and really the foundation of what allows us to perform. So this includes taking in adequate energy from calories at a really base level. And calorie requirements do vary by gender, your anthropometrics, and that's just your height and weight, your activity intensity, the duration of your activity, and the level of training. And the calories you require for basic metabolism, bodily function, energy, that all won't be consistent every day necessarily, but that level remains relatively similar unless you experience some significant period of rest or injury or illness. So we'll come back to this in a couple slides. So macronutrients are really important to talk about in this context too. Each one has a really different role in the body and in performance too. But put simply, macronutrients are just the major nutrients in our diet that we need in large amounts. So that includes the energy from calories, carbohydrates, proteins, fats, cholesterol, fiber, and then sometimes water is on that list as well. But colloquially, we just refer to macronutrients as carbs, protein, and fat. So as athletes, it is super vital for us to eat enough of these macronutrients to support a lot of things that have to do with our performance, but especially metabolism, brain health, immunity, hormone balance, muscle mass, bones, etc. For example, we need protein for muscle growth and repair, fat for cell integrity and sex hormone synthesis, and carbs for gut health. Those are just very few roles that those macros have. And of course, each of these macros are energy sources, with each one of them contributing varying amounts of energy depending on the primary energy system that is at work. I also think micronutrients are important in this context too, because micros are the vitamins and minerals that we really need in those smaller amounts. And that helps us with proper functioning in the body. So they're essential for metabolic processes related to our general health, but also aspects of performance as well. And that includes both physical activity and growth. And both vitamins and minerals do have roles in performance, and that involves energy metabolism, red blood cell metabolism, and also antioxidant functionality, which of course, those are all really integral to peak performance. And they can act as cofactors to help with the basic physiological functioning of the body as well. But in essence, we need them. So a wholesome diet that is not energy deficient can provide adequate vitamins and minerals. And there are a lot of dietary factors at play with performance, but building that strong foundation will ultimately be your best recipe for success here. And once that foundation is established, you can then experiment with the nutrient timing and ergogenic aids for performance enhancement as well. So I know this kind of looks like a candy corn. I just realized that. But up here, the top white part, that's what I like to call the performance peak, because you have this foundation with the energy coming in, your macronutrients, and then micronutrients. And those are really important for the basics of health, but performance as well. And then if you want to help improve that peak performance, you have up here the supplements and those ergogenic aids, and then also you can utilize nutrient timing as well. So why, as athletes, do we need to care about nutrition? I'd like to get a little bit more specific here. And this goes back to my absolute favorite thing to tell people. If you are training with a specific performance goal in mind, you are an athlete. You don't have to be a pro to be an athlete, but that also means that you need to fuel like an athlete. And that usually means having a pretty good plan. So, as I mentioned before, as athletes, we are constantly pushing our limits. And when we push our limits, we become more at risk of injury. So, the three pillars of why an athlete would need nutrition are performance, injury prevention and rehab, and then also for health. And if we want to be at peak performance, reduce injury risk, and maintain our health, we need nutrition because it is at the very center of these pillars. So now I'd like to narrow in on injury prevention and rehab specifically. So you may already be aware of the tools for injury prevention and rehab, and you can prevent injury by slowly introducing new training over time and incrementally bumping up from there. You can implement stretching before or after your training sessions or your performance sessions. Sleep is also required, and rest days are also important for recovery and repair. And rehabbing an injury won't look too different, but you may have additional tools such as working with a PT, a chiropractor, or other rehab specialists too, just to help you heal. And a lot of evidence is now actually suggesting that movement is an important part of healing too. But what I often see here is that nutrition will take a back seat. And nutrition really is the foundation of prevention and rehab. So even if you do everything on these lists, if you have poor nutrition, that will increase your injury risk and slow your recovery time, which is why we as athletes need to take our nutrition into consideration. So now we'll get into a couple nutritional strategies that'll help prevent injuries. And nutrition for injury prevention isn't a fancy diet that only athletes follow. It's just simply a basic way of eating to support both fitness and long-term health goals as well. And before I get into the specifics, the big overarching themes here are just simply to make sure your caloric needs are met, consume a balanced distribution of macronutrients, and then make sure you are taking in a variety of things to ensure that you're getting your micros. So I recommend also that all of my athletes follow a plan just to take the guesswork out of eating. And that's just to support performance and recovery as well. But my first recommendation to prevent injury is to eat consistent and wholesome meals. And this means eating regular meals on both training and rest days without skipping. So you may not opt for that traditional 3-meal-a-day schedule. Maybe 5 days with smaller meals is something that would work better for you. But that consistent eating time actually ensures that you maintain your muscle mass, not pulling protein from your muscle to use as energy. It helps with mental acuity, and then also it stabilizes our blood sugar and keeps it stable without those big ups and downs. And when we skip meals, our bodies begin to utilize those protein stores for energy. So again, breaking down the muscles, metabolizing that that source of nutrition for performance or for energy levels in general, our concentration declines, and our blood sugar dips. So if we try to perform or train in this fasted state, we really won't be at our peak and we may actually expose ourselves to injury. The next thing I recommend is to add variety. And this comes down to getting your dose of micronutrients. So if you eat broccoli or spinach every single day, that is awesome and it's wonderful. But if that's all you eat, I want to make sure you know that variety is what ensures that you get micronutrients in differing amounts. Some foods offer more micros than others. And for example, I can get some vitamins from leafy greens. I can get them from bananas, potatoes. But if I want to maximize all my micros, I'm better off taking in additional fruits and vegetables of a variety of colors. So just making sure I'm getting that diversity, because that's really where that source of the differing doses of those micronutrients will come from. And another thing I'd like to mention here is that any extreme diet that suggests the exclusion or elimination of an entire food group. And what comes to mind here is the carnivore diet, but that should be reserved for some very specific circumstances, because when you exclude major food groups, that's, you're omitting some major micronutrient sources. So again, reserve those for either a medically recommended diet, but while meat and those restricted diets do offer a long list of micronutrients in their own ways, you just can't get all of the micros you need from the one food source. So just food for thought there. Another recommendation is to make a plan. And I'm actually not a huge fan of meal prepping, and that's just because I think dedicating a whole day to cooking just causes food fatigue. It minimizes your ability to get that variety, but that doesn't mean you can't still make a plan. So usually I suggest that my clients make a master list of all of their meals, and that includes things they've always or they usually make on their weekly list, or things that they would like to make in the future. And you can choose as many meals as you want to put on your list, and then when you go grocery shopping, you simply buy what's on that list. So I think that takes the guesswork out of weeknight meals by just setting up a plan for your week, so that when you come home from work, or maybe I have a lot of clients who go to the gym from 6 to 10 p.m. and you don't want to have to think about it, and you just want to make what you've planned for. So by having a plan, you commit to eating that meal, and even when you're tired and don't want to think about it, that just minimizes your chances that you'll go to bed hungry after a hard session or a hard day. And it just takes the struggle out of it, I think. And what I like to do is I actually put my list of meals on the fridge on a just little small whiteboard. So I know what I'm going to make, I have options. And then I've really noticed that this has cut back on my food waste as well, which is important to me. And I know a lot of you probably as well. So nutrient timing is another key recommendation for preventing injuries. And I love this one because this is the easiest way to boost performance while also increasing calories. And that'll help you prevent your energy deficit. And this also goes hand in hand with planning, but if you strategize snacks within and around your training or performance sessions, you're fueling your body with what it actually needs to perform, and that minimizes injury risk. So another timing strategy that I recommend to all of my clients is to have a protein-rich snack or even a protein shake before bed. And the purpose of that is to prevent that muscle protein degradation during that overnight fast, and then also prevent muscle soreness the next day. And finally, I think this one may actually be the unpopular recommendation, but limit alcohol. So, unfortunately, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but alcohol affects rehydration status. So, getting your fluids after an intense training session or performance session, and it minimizes glycogen synthesis, but it also impacts hormone function as well. So all of this just means that if we're trying to perform at our peak after drinking, we won't, plain and simple. And this just predisposes us to injury because we may compensate for that lack of energy by pushing ourselves in unusual ways, bending in different positions, pushing ourselves in different ways, and pushing through tweakiness that may not normally be there. But also, if we're buzzed while we're performing, our judgment is impaired, which inevitably exposes us and those around us to injury as well. So the general rule of thumb, and this is in terms of what's healthy and recommended, is 2 drinks per day for men, 1 drink per day for women. But take this recommendation with a grain of salt because alcohol, even in small doses, may have longer impacts on health. So all of these recommendations, I think, can simply be implemented into your life with the focus of injury prevention. So now let's get into nutrition as a rehab tool. And as I mentioned earlier, sometimes injuries are just unavoidable. And if you are injured, here are just a few ways that you can utilize nutrition to aid in that recovery process. So most importantly, this is the biggest, if anything, you take this away, do not restrict calories when you are injured. Calorie and macronutrient requirements change with both injury and illness. And it may actually surprise you to know that when you are injured, you need more nutrients and calories coming in because your body is basically scrambling to heal. And that requires increased energy metabolism and output. So this is not a time to restrict if you are injured. And reducing energy intake during recovery will actually slow the recovery process. And here's why. So when you reduce your calories during an injury, the rate of muscle loss is accelerated because your body is pulling energy from your protein. And the lack of exercise and the reduction in nutrients coming in, primarily protein, increases rapid muscle loss. So this is also why it's generally recommended that during periods of injury, you actually increase your protein consumption to 2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. And so if just a quick calculation, if you want to convert your weight in pounds to your weight in kilograms, it's simply just your weight in pounds divided by 2.2. So that'll give you your weight in kilograms. So during injury, this is actually what's happening. Your immune system is activated, and that causes a rapid turnover of those immune cells. And many of those immune cells are actually proteins themselves. So you can offset that cell turnover and that nitrogen loss with the consumption of more protein, with an emphasis on those high quality proteins. And when I say high quality, I simply just mean the proteins that are highest in leucine, which is an amino acid that is the top stimulator of muscle protein synthesis, so just building muscle. And that'll help you maintain muscle mass and prevent that wasting if you are laid up for a while. And those high leucine sources are eggs, dairy products, soy, and then also meat too. And like with injury prevention, consuming that consistent, wholesome, and well-balanced meal is still super, super important. So if you can consume colors there too, this will help with recovery just by giving your body what it needs to deal with the injury itself. So remember your micros and your colors. And finally, staying hydrated helps ensure that your body can deliver those necessary nutrients and those immune system components to that site of injury so that it can decrease in the inflammation and also start to heal and repair itself. And if you combine rehabbing strategies with these nutrition recommendations, you will likely have better recovery outcomes. And before we tie this all together, I really wanted to touch on the specifics behind why energy deficits expose us to more injury and then also reduce our ability to recover quickly. So when we restrict calories, whether that's intentional or not, we have no control over where our body will take energy from. And actually, in most circumstances, the body will choose protein first because even though we may want to lose fat, if that's our goal with the deficit, we really need fat for both organ and cell protection. And our body knows this, and it really doesn't give it up so easily. So when we restrict and our body metabolizes protein from muscles as energy, we lose our muscle mass, we lose our strength, and then we also lose our power. So we also become more at risk of those musculoskeletal injuries as well. And basically all the hard work you put into training just goes down the drain. So in this process too of calorie restriction and energy deficits, we also weaken our bones. And calorie restriction actually causes more porous bones. And that exposes us up to a number of injuries, especially stress fractures. And that's especially if we start to push ourselves to perform. And I also want to make note here that the chronic energy deficits also impact our mental health, our hormones, our metabolism, and our immunity. And all of these are implicated in performance and can actually contribute to increased risk of depression, poor wound healing, gut imbalances, menstrual dysfunction, the classic red S or the female athlete triad come to mind here, but also metabolic dysregulation and reduced mental acuity. And you also may be missing just the basic critical nutrients in your diet when you restrict, which can result in malnutrition. So the simple truth of the matter is that if you restrict calories and maintain that severe energy deficit over time, you are bound to face injury. So one of the components of myself as a functional sports nutritionist simply just means that there are possible root causes to a number of ailments and things that go wrong. And this is just to simply show you that when you have an energy deficit, it affects so many things in our body. And we really need all of these things if we want to not only live and live healthfully, but also perform. Okay, so we made it to the end. I kind of went through everything a little bit quickly. I know it's a lot of information. By now, you hopefully know that in order to reduce injury risk and improve your recovery, you need to eat. But more importantly, you also need to have good nutrition. And again, our main goals as athletes are to increase performance, prevent injury, and maintain our long-term health as well. But to get there, we need a few things. So for long-term goals, we really need to meet those energy demands, getting the calories required that, from basic living too, but also your activity level, making sure that your nutrient intake is good there. We need to take an adequate protein for growth and repair of our tissues. And then we also need to make sure we are staying hydrated. We want to make sure that we are maintaining our overall health, and that's through our diet. We want to make sure that also, and we didn't touch on this too much, but maintain an adequate weight and body composition. So essentially all I'd like to say here is that make sure you aren't in a deficit over long periods of time. And that's simply just to make sure that you don't expose yourself to risk of injury, but also, there is something to be said about the body composition goals. And if you have questions on that, we can talk about it more. But all of these long-term goals will help you minimize injury risk and then continue doing what you love for years to come. And that's, the main goal as athletes. We want that longevity in our sport. But we also need short-term goals to help facilitate these longer-term goals. And that includes consuming a diet that will delay fatigue during training and competition, but also using those dietary strategies. Basically, eat consistently, simply, make it simple, but also have a plan that you can stick with and that is sustainable for you. And it's also important to time your nutrients. So make sure that you're replenishing your glycogen stores, so just your carbs, and then also boosting your muscle protein synthesis by taking in protein at specific times as well. And then also avoiding dehydration, supporting your recovery, and that comes back to making sure that you're eating enough, but also getting those recovery meals too. Avoid those severe energy deficits. And you may also want to improve your performance with those ergogenic aids or just those tools like Gnarly products to help improve your performance if it's appropriate for you. And then also make sure you're getting adequate sleep and take rest days as needed. So there's no one size fits all plan when it comes to nutrition, but the basic concepts are pretty universal. And if you're looking to maximize your nutrition for the purpose of injury prevention, my best recommendation here is to just look for a plan that takes into consideration your health, your history, your background information, the specific bioenergetics of your sport and training in which you actually participate, your current living and eating arrangements. So, are you in school? Is there a cafeteria available? Do you not have a microwave? But then also your travel schedule, which maybe is not the concern right now, but then also access to food as well, which is also very important. But make sure whichever plan you follow is optimized for your actual unique needs, because we are all very unique, and whatever works for me may be different for you. So I guess now we will open it up for questions, but I want to thank you all so much for listening in, even if you're listening to the recorded version. It's been an honor to talk about this subject. And if you do want to get in contact with me, I do work one-on-one with clients on their nutrition. And you can reach me at nutrition@caitlinholmes.com. That's my email. Or, of course, I'd love to connect with you over Instagram, and you can find me at Dirtbag Nutritionist. So,
Awesome, Caitlin. So informative. We have one question now. Feel free to add them if you're, collecting your thoughts after all that information. Christian wants to know what your thoughts are about intermittent fasting.
Okay, so intermittent fasting is a really good question. That's something I'm asked a lot, actually. There are kind of like two spheres where that's worth talking about. The first one, for general health, there's a lot to be said about intermittent fasting in terms of that being good for your longevity in terms of like DNA and your mitochondrial health. That's another topic altogether. But I think in the scope of athletes, intermittent fasting is something that I generally don't recommend, just because when you narrow down, especially your window of eating, you minimize your ability to really take in as much as you may actually need. So it's really hard to eat during the entire day, but also it's even harder to eat during that small window of when you can actually start taking in food. And also it limits when you can train, because you probably don't want to be training when you're not able to take in food around that time. And if you are participating in intermittent fasting, I still would recommend working with someone who could help walk you through it, because I've found too that a lot of my clients who have tried intermittent fasting, it usually causes either a trigger of a past disordered eating, or it starts to cause those thoughts in their head. So there's a balance there, but yeah.
Yeah, great answer. I mean, I agree. I think that's been my experience with it as well. And there's not a ton of research showing that it helps with performance or recovery or anything that
Right.
you talked about today. So Okay, John has a question regarding carbs. Are you generally referring to complex carbs versus simple carbs? And can you address simple carbs and what role they play, especially during a race or event?
Yeah, so, I think there's a lot of discussion about simple versus complex and if you can digest it in time or not, if it's too complex. But there's actually, the data is not really showing that there's much of a difference. And that just has to do with how our body's processing those carbs. But um, I would say that, eat what you can that's well tolerated, especially within that, 1 to 4 hour time frame before a race or a competition or some type of performance um, session. Generally, the rule of thumb is like 1 gram of carbs per kilogram of body weight the hour before, 2 grams of carbs uh, per kilogram body weight 2 hours before, etc. And when you get further away, that's of course when you'd want to have a meal. And that doesn't mean when that's how much you need to have, that's just how much the body can process and metabolize into usable energy. So I think I'm answering that. There's just really no difference between the simple and complex. It's really what works best for you. If complex carbs keep you satiated and energized, awesome. If energy chews and some type of sports drink work better for you, awesome.
Great. Any other questions, guys? I really appreciated the time that you spent talking about the negatives of being in an energy deficit in terms of performance. I think there's been a lot of really good discussion around that in the climbing community, and it's definitely prevalent in other communities. I think a lot of people think about the outcome, so of potentially being lighter with climbing better, and don't think about the negatives that occur in terms of
Mm-hmm.
performance and injury risk in the process of getting there. So it's great to see you cover it so thoroughly.
Yeah, I've you just see especially in the climbing sphere, and I mean really any of the performance, well, all sports are performance based, but when there's that visual aspect to it, that the weight, and it's more of an emphasis on body weight rather than body composition, which those are two very different things, and I think it's an important discussion that we need to keep having.
I agree. Another question from Rena. Um, how does staying hydrated help you in the recovery process? Great question.
Yeah, so in the recovery process, I mean, um, exercise in general is an inflammatory process, and that's normal, totally fine. But by making sure that we are well hydrated, we also have the ability to deliver really important nutrients to different places in the body through our blood. And if we're dehydrated, we can't get those nutrients to those locations in the body, and makes our blood more viscous and, slows things down for the recovery process. And then also, flushing out the gunk, like not that lactic acid is a bad thing, but that'll also help move that around as well. And I don't know if you have anything to add there, Shannon.
I think also just thinking about how a lot of our tissues function, and
Yeah.
in order to function properly, they have to be hydrated. And
Yep.
so part of recovery is that proper functioning, and particularly if you're recovering from an injury, and more than that, like musculoskeletal injuries, which are,
Right.
critical, for a climber, being dehydrated, not drinking enough at the crag, you're kind of setting yourself up for a bad situation there in terms of ligament
Absolutely.
and tendon pulls. Christian's got a question. If early mornings are best for my workout schedule, what do you recommend nutritionally? What to consume and when? This is an issue that I deal with as well, Christian, so I'm glad you asked it.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I'm about to actually start shifting my workouts to the morning too. So I've been experimenting with this a bit. But really, I would say it does depend on whatever you're going to do in the morning. So if you're going to run, for example, you could, and that's again running not at a high intensity, that's like, low intensity, long duration jogging. That would be, you could do that in a fasted state when you've trained that at some point. But I generally always recommend that no matter what, you still have some type of carb rich snack before your workout. Even if, you wake up, jump out of bed, you eat something really quickly, and then you hop on and train whatever it is you're training that day. And maybe an energy drink isn't the worst thing, just because, that's, you're getting rehydrated from overnight not drinking anything, but you're also getting those carbs too. But I generally will do something simple like a piece of toast, or maybe a granola bar, or well, something like yogurt with fruit on the bottom. So something that's just really, really quick that I can eat. Some people I know will do like fruit chews or energy, those energy little tube things in the morning. And that works well for them, but it's, something carb rich that you can have right away that's quick and easy is my biggest recommendation.
Yep, I do the same thing. Sometimes it's whatever I have in my cabinet, which is a
Right. Whatever you
yeah,
can pull.
something you can digest quickly. And I
Yeah.
think that's where the timing and the simple carbs versus complex carbs and
Yeah.
what your body can absorb quickly comes into.
Yeah.
Um, Jennifer wanted to hear some more information on nutrition for rehab after injury. She had a ACL reconstruction 2 years ago and had a huge nutrition and supplement regimen, including amino acids, herbs, and collagen. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Just curious what your recommendations are for kind of specific injuries like that.
Yeah, for injuries like that, I think it goes back to your basic diet, making sure that you are eating consistently, you're not remaining in an energy deficit, really bumping up your calories from protein, especially. And I do think, collagen is one of those additional supplements that would help, just because it has been shown to help with collagen synthesis in the body, which, with those connective tissue injuries, that's certainly not a bad thing. But you can also eat fruits and vegetables, and those are natural collagen synthesis stimulators as well, especially those high in vitamin C. Um, so if your basic diet is, where you feel like you're taking in enough energy with that protein emphasis, I think that's your best approach there. Um, I think herbs start to get into that anti-inflammatory, but you can still do that with the diet as well. So at the end of the day, you don't need the herbs, but if you find that they are working well for you, by all means, awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I was long, you can ask anyone at Gnarly, I was a long time collagen skeptic because there's a lot of research also showing that leucine and essential amino acids, but leucine in particular, can be as powerful in stimulating collagen synthesis as the peptides and amino acids that you find in collagen.
Mm-hmm.
And there's still some research that needs to be done, kind of comparing the
For
two.
sure.
I always like to emphasize that if you're adding collagen to your diet, it should be in addition to all the high
Mm-hmm.
quality protein you're getting from whole foods um, and potentially supplements if that works for you. Because collagen in and of itself isn't a really great protein for recovery.
Yep.
Doesn't have a lot of essential amino acids. So it can be helpful, but it should be an additive and shouldn't replace anything in terms of high quality protein in your diet.
Yeah. Great point. Definitely.
Rena was thankful for your emphasis on hydration because she's noticed that women drink very little amount of water at the crag to
Oh
try
yeah.
to
I'm
avoid
guilty too.
yeah. Brooke is wondering if you have specific recommends on post-exercise nutrition.
So number one, always protein within that 2 hour window, the classic anabolic window. The one thing I will say here too is for women, this is especially important. Men have that anabolic window for up to 21 hours. Women are just 2 hours. So that is your best time to actually take in protein, and then also replenish your glycogen stores. And that's just because exercise has what's called an insulin-like effect. And you're essentially priming your body to take in those nutrients. So I always recommend both a carb and a protein rich snack just because they are absorbed in great amounts after your workout. So that'll help replenish any of those stored carbs that you've lost, but then also help start to support the muscle growth and repair and recovery, and also prevent muscle soreness the next day as well. So like the easiest one I can recommend right now is like those fruit or those yogurts with fruit on the bottom, because you have that really high protein source with fruit on the bottom. If you can't do dairy, or you choose not to do dairy, you could also just do a protein shake. You know, pea protein is a great source too, and that does have carbs in it. You could do a smoothie with banana in it, and then that way you're getting your protein and your carb pretty easily. You could do peanut butter and jelly, you know, a turkey sandwich, something like that would work well too.
Awesome. Any other questions, guys? I think we have a little bit more time. If anybody has anything else they want to ask, give it just a little bit. Yeah, as I was saying on the collagen, it's funny because I said I was a collagen skeptic. But since we came out with it, I've been taking it pretty regularly, and I have this weird, I broke a
Me
toe.
too.
I broke a toe when I was
Oh
in high
no.
school and it sounds so funny because it's just a toe, but I broke it at the growth plate, and it turned into
Oh,
this kind of arthritic joint that is just like continuously painful for me, always. And I have had no pain for the last 5 days.
that's
So
amazing. Proof in the
yeah,
pudding,
I mean,
right?
there's good research showing that it can help, you know, patients that have clinical osteoarthritis, that can minimize joint pain. And
Yeah.
yeah, so I now say skeptic in the past tense because I don't know, I'm gonna wait and see, but it's the first time that my toe hasn't hurt in years. So I'm going with it.
Yeah, that's a great immediate feedback. I used to be a skeptic too. I was like, I don't know, but I think in terms of what it has been it shown to do and what it's starting to, what at least what the research is starting to show, I think more of the studies are a bit more comprehensive and like better laid out in terms of quality. So I'm like, okay, I'm on board, and I've had a lot of great success with it too. And yeah, I think it's a great additional tool for injury prevention.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, well, thanks everybody for coming, Caitlin. Thanks for an amazing talk. And as a
Thank
reminder,
you.
if you have time, please fill out the survey at the end. And yeah, you know, please stay tuned because we've had such a great response from this kind of series of talks that we're going to continue to do this kind of thing in the future. Education is something that we feel really strongly about it at Gnarly. So we're happy to bring together all the experts and athletes and just community members we know that have great things to share. So thanks so much. And Caitlin, thanks so much, everybody. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you so much.